Remarks last night at an LGBT fundraiser where she likened half of Donald Trump supporters to a, quote, basket of deplorables. However, Clinton says she only regrets half of that statement, arguing that Trump's rhetoric, as well as his connections to the so-called alt-right movement, truly are deplorable. The Republican nominee seizing on the controversy in hope that it could somehow affect Clinton in the polls, unleashing, of course, a flurry of tweets as well as a statement saying, and I'm quoting, "For the first time in a long while, her true feelings came out, showing bigotry and hatred for millions of Americans. How can she be president of our country when she has such contempt and disdain for so many great Americans?" End quote. We've got Fox team coverage for you on this one. Kristen Fisher is covering the Trump campaign from Washington. But we begin here in studio with Brian Yennis, who's got the latest on the Clinton campaign. And Brian, this isn't the first time Hillary Clinton has called Trump supporters deplorables, but now she's apologizing.
Right, Julie, it's not the first time at all. She used the exact same phrasing in an interview with Israeli TV on Thursday. Politico reports she also referenced half of Trump supporters as deplorables in closed-door fundraising events in August in California. But the moment everyone is talking about happened last night at a fundraising event here in New York. She said half of Trump supporters legitimately feel like the government and the economy has let them down and they are desperate for change. But listen to how she described the other half of Trump supporters.
Wow. To just be grossly generalistic, you could put half of Trump supporters into what I call the basket of deplorables. Right? The racist, sexist, homophobic, xenophobic, Islamophobic, you name it.
She also said some of those were irredeemable and not America, as to referencing some of those supporters. This caused major backlash, including Trump's campaign manager, Kellyanne Conway, who demanded an apology. So this afternoon, Hillary Clinton released the following statement, which reads in part, "Last night I was grossly generalistic, and that's never a good idea. I regret saying half. That was wrong. But let's be clear, what's really deplorable is that Donald Trump hired a major advocate for the so-called alt-right movement to run his campaign, and that David Duke and other white supremacists see him as a champion of their values. I won't stop calling out bigotry and racist rhetoric in this campaign. As I said, many of Trump's supporters are hardworking Americans who just don't feel like the economy or our political system are working for them." A senior Clinton aide says she was referring specifically to half his Trump supporters who attend his rallies, Julie, not his overall voter support.
Her running mate is also defending Clinton's comments.
Right. Interestingly, Senator Tim Kaine this morning telling the Washington Post before Hillary Clinton's regret statement that he didn't believe she needed to apologize, saying, quote, she was generalizing and saying there are some of his supporters we'll never get because they're motivated by some dark motives, but there are other supporters that have legitimate concerns and questions about the economy, and we've got to speak to them in the campaign. And even to the extent that they vote against us, we still have to respond to their concerns if we have the opportunity to govern. All of this, as the Clinton campaign said this week, Julie, they are shifting strategy to try to focus on a more positive message.
All right. Brian Yennis, great to see you, by the way.
Great to see you. Welcome back.
I know. I've missed you.
I've missed
4
you.
months of no one to pick on. I don't know what I've done with myself. All right, Brian, thank you very much.
Take care, Julie.
Well, Donald Trump and his running mate firing back at Hillary Clinton for those comments. The Republican nominee responding from the road. He was in St. Louis attending the funeral of conservative activist Phyllis Schlafly. But basically, Governor Mike Pence also defended their supporters when he spoke at the Values Voter Summit today. And that is where we find Kristen Fisher live in Washington. So, Kristen, what exactly are Trump and Pence saying about how Hillary Clinton described half of their supporters?
Well, Julie, Trump is calling it the worst mistake of the entire political season. And just to give you an idea of how big a deal this is, the hashtag basket of deplorables is still one of the top trends on Twitter. It has been all day long. Everyone inside the Trump campaign is talking about it. Some are even calling this Clinton's 47% moment, a reference to Mitt Romney's gaffe back in 2012. Meanwhile, Mike Pence, he's making a different comparison, and he made it earlier today here at the Voters Values Summit. He says that he's not heard that level of disdain for American voters since then candidate Barack Obama's comment back in 2008 about people who cling to their guns and their religion.
So let me just say from the bottom of my heart, Hillary, They are not a basket of anything. They are Americans, and they deserve your respect.
As for the man at the top of the ticket, Donald Trump is calling her comments a grotesque attack on American voters, and that, quote, for the first time in a long while, her true feelings came out, showing bigotry and hatred for millions of Americans. And, Julie, I have to say, a lot of the Christian conservatives that I spoke with here today at the Values Voters Summit say they were offended by Clinton's remarks.
So Mike Pence really did come to his running mate's defense today. It's pretty much to be expected, but how did he defend Trump's recent comments about Putin?
Well, this is an issue that's really been a problem for the Trump campaign in recent days. So today in Virginia, Mike Pence really set out to try to explain Trump's praise of Russian President Vladimir Putin. And he essentially said that those comments were not an endorsement of Putin, but rather an indictment of President Obama.
Donald Trump and I said that the small and bullying president of Russia was a strong leader on the world stage. That wasn't an endorsement of Vladimir Putin. That was an indictment of the weak and feckless leadership of this president and your running mate.
Now, something to watch out for tomorrow. Both Trump and Clinton are going to be marking the 15th anniversary of 9/11 by attending the official commemoration at Ground Zero. Now, neither candidate is expected to speak, but it could make for some very awkward moments on a day that should be all about remembering the victims. Julie?
Kristen Fisher in Washington, thank you so much. A new ceasefire in Syria is set to affect Monday night. The deal brokered by American and Russian negotiators calls for fighting to stop between the Russian-backed Syrian forces and American-backed rebels. But after 5 years of civil war, skepticism is high. John Huddy reports from our Middle East Bureau.
Well, Julie, turning point, possible breakthrough. These are some of the descriptions of a new ceasefire agreement to try to stop the vicious and brutal fighting in Syria. But once again, it may come down to whether or not Syria's government and the opposition forces it's fighting are willing to hold their fire. That said, Secretary of State John Kerry and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov announced the agreement early Saturday morning in Geneva. The plan will begin with a cessation of hostilities, a ceasefire, to start at sundown Monday.
This requires halting all attacks, including aerial bombardments, and any attempts to gain additional territory at the expense of the parties to the cessation. It requires unimpeded and sustained humanitarian access to all of the besieged and the hard-to-reach areas, including Aleppo.
If the truce holds for 7 days, the U.S. and Russia would then begin a joint military and intelligence sharing operation combating ISIS and the al-Qaeda affiliate in Syria, Jabhat Fatah al-Sham, formerly known as Jabhat al-Nusra or the Nusra Front. Past ceasefire negotiations have collapsed in part because of confusion over opposition groups that were part of a deal and extremist groups that were not, with both still being attacked.
I want to stress that distinguishing between terrorists and moderate oppositions has been written as a priority into the document that we agreed today.
But let me be clear. Out of all of this complexity, there is emerging now a simple choice between war and peace.
Still, some top U.S. officials are concerned about the United States sharing military and intelligence information with Russia. And then there are those who doubt the agreement will even hold as fighting continued today in Syria. Julie?
John Huddy, thank you. Right now, a solemn ceremony in southern Pennsylvania is getting underway, remembering a group of American heroes who gave their lives to fight back against the 9/11 hijackers. 40 candles are being arranged this hour at the Wall of Names in Shanksville, where Flight 93 crashed 15 years ago tomorrow. Investigators think the hijackers intended to crash the plane into the U.S. Capitol building. Well, tonight's ceremony, a tribute to the passengers who sprang into action, saving countless lives, remembered as heroes. And coming up, co-host of The Five, Dana Perino, takes an emotional walk through that memorial with powerful interviews from the people trying to keep the faith and patriotism of those victims alive. It's an incredible story. You cannot miss it. We'll have it at the bottom of the hour. Well, the man who attempted to assassinate President Ronald Reagan, now a free man. The latest on the release of John Hinckley Jr. Plus, protesters hailing it as a major victory after the Obama administration orders a work stoppage on a controversial energy project.
I think it's a travesty, and for them to allow a corporation like this corporation out of Texas to come in and take advantage of people just for $1.
The man who shot President Reagan is now free and at home with his mother in Virginia. 61-year-old John Hinckley Jr. was released, in fact, from a mental hospital today, more than 35 years after the assassination attempt. He will live with his mother in Williamsburg, Virginia for at least 1 year and continue with regular therapy sessions. He also has restrictions on travel and is required to work or volunteer 3 days a week. Well, the Obama administration ordering a work stoppage on part of a multi-billion-dollar oil pipeline. That has sparked major protests in North Dakota, as you can see. The decision coming just minutes after a federal judge struck down a request from a Native American tribe who apparently claim the project is a threat to ancient tribal lands. Will Carr has the very latest from Los Angeles. Hey, Will, so how did this play out yesterday?
Well, welcome back, Julie. There was a lot of back and forth. At first, this construction had the green light from a federal judge, as you mentioned, but then pretty much everybody was caught by surprise, including the tribe, the Standing Rock Sioux tribe, who called the government's decision a game changer. The Army and the Departments of Justice and the Interior ended up suspending construction on part of the pipeline yesterday afternoon, while the Army reconsiders if the project should move forward. The decision comes after thousands of people have been protesting at the construction site. It even turned violent last week as protesters clashed with construction crews and private security. The aftermath was caught on cell phone video. Take a look.
All them scare tactics, They packing up and leaving. They packing up and leaving. Scare tactics.
The government has asked the oil company to voluntarily stop construction on parts of the pipeline. It's unclear if that's going to happen, Julie.
So what are the tribe and oil companies now saying now that the construction has actually been suspended?
Well, the tribe is definitely celebrating the government's decision, and both the tribe and environmentalists are vowing to stop the construction at any cost of this pipeline that's supposed to be nearly 1,200 miles or so. They do admit the pipeline does not cross Indian land, but say it will pollute the nearby Missouri River and will destroy ancient burial sites.
We provided evidence on Friday of sacred sites that were directly in the pipeline's route. By Saturday morning, those sites had been destroyed.
The oil company believes the federal judge's ruling should be upheld. They say the pipeline will create jobs, pump millions of dollars into local economies, and provide safe, reliable ways to transport oil across the region.
Everyone can have their say. This pipeline does not cross the Indian reservation, and while there might be strong opinions held on either side, we need to honor the rule of law.
The oil company Energy Transfer Partners declined to comment for our story. Julie.
All right, Will Carr in Los Angeles, thank you. New information emerging about last year's terror attack in San Bernardino. 14 people, remember, gunned down by a radicalized couple. Well, now we are learning some of those victims actually fought back. We'll have more on that. Plus, homegrown terror on the rise. In the 15 years since terrorists hijacked 4 planes to carry out the 9/11 attacks. So what have we learned since that terrible day?
No, nothing can prepare you for that moment. Just like nothing could prepare anyone for a 9/11, for a San Bernardino.
New details now emerging about last year's terror attack in San Bernardino, California. A brand new report describes the terror in that government building as the husband and wife extremists opened fire. It says 3 county employees actually rushed one of the attackers and they were all shot. The report doesn't say, however, if the men survived, but a federal prosecutor praised their action. The radicalized couple, Saeed Farouk and Tashfeen Malik, killed 14 in that fateful attack. They were shot dead by police on the highway as they tried to escape. Well, homegrown terrorists such as that pair have emerged as major threats in the 15 years since the 9/11 attacks, a tragic day that the nation and world will remember tomorrow and never forget. So what have we learned in that time? Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge caught up with Homeland Security Secretary Jay Johnson for an exclusive interview as federal workers return to a reimagined and rebuilt Ground Zero.
15 years after nearly 3,000 Americans were murdered in New York City, Washington, D.C., and Shanksville, Pennsylvania, the threat is more diverse with the emergence of homegrown terrorists and encrypted communications that make it increasingly difficult for investigators to track.
9/11 was the prime example of a terrorist-directed attack. We now live with the prospect, in addition, of terrorist-inspired attacks, where ISIL, Al-Qaeda, tries to literally reach into our homeland through the internet, through social media. Catherine, welcome.
With exclusive access, Fox News went with Homeland Security Secretary Jay Johnson as federal government employees return to Ground Zero for the first time in 15 years and take up new workspace at One World Trade Center.
Oh, say, can you see?
The return marked by today's ceremony is deeply personal for those who lived through the attacks.
In some ways, it feels like victory, you know.
Goes to our resilience as Americans, as New Yorkers, as people of the free world, that we won't let somebody else dictate what we do.
The anniversary as well as the current threat are never far from anyone's mind.
Is there a specific or credible threat to the 15th anniversary?
We know of no specific credible threat around this 15th anniversary, but in this environment, it's important to frankly not get too hung up on that. When you're dealing with terrorist-inspired attacks, which could strike with little or no notice, the cop on the beat could be the one to detect the next terrorist attack on the U.S.
Are there plots that have been disrupted on your watch that the public is not aware of?
All the time, yes. We have prevented a number of actors from carrying out their intent at the very latest stages of their plotting and their planning.
Johnson says Tashfeen Malik and Omar Farouk, who gunned down 14 in San Bernardino, California, and Omar Mateen at the Pulse nightclub in Orlando, are the new faces of a self-radicalized threat.
Can anything ever prepare you for the moment when a terrorist murders 49 people in a Florida nightclub?
No, nothing can prepare you for that moment, just like nothing could prepare anyone for a 9/11, for a San Bernardino.
What do we know about Omar Mateen today that we didn't know in June?
There were very definitely signs, and if people close to someone who carries out an act of terror can be encouraged to come forward and say something, that does make a difference.
On the debate over Syrian refugees coming to the U.S. and whether it will increase the risk, Johnson is guarded.
I don't comment on what the candidates say. To vilify and isolate American Muslim communities is very much counter to our Homeland Security, national security efforts. I was in my law office on...
As the anniversary approaches, Johnson, who was practicing law in New York City on 9/11, says the attacks altered his focus. For America.
Moment in my life when my brain did not believe what my eyes were seeing, and I kept thinking that out of the rubble and the smoke would emerge the towers, but it didn't happen, and it changed our nation and it changed our world.
And his department's message is one of resilience.
We are a strong, courageous, resilient nation. And so on this anniversary, it's important to remember and honor those who were killed, remember the heroes on that day, but it's also important to look forward.
In New York, Catherine Herridge, Fox News.
So are Americans more or less secure since 9/11? Chris Wallace puts that question to Jay Johnson tomorrow on Fox News Sunday, so check your local listings for the time and station in your area, or of course you can catch it at 2 o'clock and 10 p.m. right here on Fox News Channel. Remembering a group of American heroes who gave their lives to fight back against the 9/11 hijackers. Right now, 40 candles are being arranged at the Wall of Names in Shanksville, where Flight 93 crashed 15 years ago tomorrow. A look back at their ultimate sacrifice.
The men and women on Flight 93 had the ability to communicate with loved ones and others from the outside. So they were receiving information in real time. They looked at one another and said, we're not going back to an airport.
Presidential governor nominee Governor Mike Pence releasing his tax returns as promised, and they seem pretty straightforward. Now the pressure, of course, is on Donald Trump yet again to release his returns before Election Day. He previously said that he would do it, but he had to wait until his audit was complete. But Trump's now suggesting that timeline could change. Garrett Tenney has more from Washington.
Well, one thing we know for certain now is Donald Trump did not pick Mike Pence for his money. For the last month, Pence has really played down the release of his tax returns, and indeed the documents are pretty straightforward. Between 2006 and 2015, the former congressman and current governor of Indiana earned a relatively modest average of $160,000 a year, and went on to donate an average of 10% of his annual income to charity. Now the Trump campaign is trying to capitalize by contrasting Pence's returns to those of Bill and Hillary Clinton, saying in a statement, these tax returns clearly show that Mike and Karen Pence have paid their taxes, supported worthy causes, and, unlike the Clintons, the Pences have not profited from their years in public service. But the release of Pence's tax returns also again raises the issue of Donald Trump's tax returns, which he has yet to release and has repeatedly dismissed as an issue, explaining he can't release them until the IRS completes a routine audit. This week, though, he added more confusion to the issue when he repeated that answer, but then said he could release them immediately under one circumstance involving his opponent.
I'm under audit, a routine audit, and when the audit's complete, I'll release my returns. In the meantime, no comment. There's emails that she deleted. When is she going to release her emails? She probably knows how to find it. Let her release her emails, and I'll release my tax returns immediately.
What matters, though, and is yet to be seen, is whether or not this issue will actually have an impact on Trump come November. In Washington, I'm Garrett Tenney, Fox News.
Garrett, thank you. Governor Mike Pence, meantime, joining Brett Baer live in studio on Monday. So do not miss Special Report at 6 p.m. Eastern. That's again Monday right here on Fox News Channel. A solemn ceremony tonight in a field southeast of Pittsburgh, above which a desperate battle over life and death took place 15 years ago tomorrow. 40 candles arranged this hour at the Wall of Names here in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, where United Flight 93 went down. Its passengers fighting back against terror and saving countless lives. Investigators do think the 9/11 hijackers were aiming for the U.S. Capitol building. And Dana Perino, co-host of The Five, visited the wall for this moving story.
Steve, thanks for having us to this amazing memorial. I've always wanted to come because having worked in Washington and having had so many friends working in the Capitol at the time, this flight to me makes me extremely emotional.
When you think about the brave actions of these men and women on that particular morning, it really kind of culminates with this tremendous 2,200-acre memorial.
I wonder if you can maybe show me a little bit of how this turned out.
I'd be honored to do so. Here along the flight path, it shows at 8:46 American Airlines Flight 11. This was the first plane that went into the tower. And it was at this point throughout America, I think we could all agree that people really weren't sure what was happening. United Airlines Flight 175 crashed into the South Tower at precisely 9:03 and 2 seconds. So I think at that point, we all knew that America was really under attack. The men and women on Flight 93 had the ability to communicate with loved ones and others from the outside. So they were receiving information in real time. They looked at one another and said, we're not going back to an airport.
It is at that side of that boulder, which is where it finally crashed. Kenny, thanks for being willing to talk to me. Your brother was on the flight.
Yes, Louis Joseph Nackey II. We call him Joey.
So this is the final resting place?
Yes, this is where I truly believe the spirit of the 40 heroes of Flight 93 are.
What heroes?
It just amazes me that 40 different individuals from all walks of life had an opportunity. They were put in such a situation that no one is trained for. People coming together who are getting the information, putting it together. And then the most democratic thing that we have in our country, we have a right to vote. And they vote on a plan.
While terrorists are piloting their plane.
And then they kick it off. They execute the plan. And they prevent that plane from striking its intended target. I don't think when they started their assault that they thought they were going to lose.
No.
I think they had all the drive in to go home and have dinner with their families.
President Bush said it was the first act of counterterrorism in the war on terror.
With their brave decision, they launched the first counteroffensive of the war on terror. The most likely target of the hijacked plane was the United States Capitol. We'll never know how many innocent people might have been lost.
First battle won, because they didn't reach their intended target.
Right.
They took their lives, their destiny in their own hands, and they said, not today, not tomorrow, not ever.
Do you feel pride?
Oh, more than that. It's hard. I keep waiting for Joey and all of them to walk out of the trees. And, they'll dust themselves off.
You said you shed your last tear.
I did, didn't I? Joey was an amazing dad, husband, brother, cousin, and friend.
And patriot.
Yes.
Citizen.
Very well said.
This is him.
Yes, it's him. I always come back here, I rub my hand back and forth just to let them know I'm here.
I'm here with Park Ranger Robert Franz. What is the most frequently asked question that you get?
Why did we fill in that impact site? Because when the FBI had finished with the investigation, it looked nothing like it did on September 11, 2001. They turned the site over to the coroner, and he looks at those large piles of earth. He's gathered about 8% of the remains, but he realizes he'll never gather any more. That earth there, those piles of earth, are their final resting place. So the question, why did they fill it in? Well, that's why.
It's sacred ground.
It is.
One of the things President Bush said in 2011 is that we have a duty to remember and a duty to live.
We have a duty beyond memory. We have a duty to live our lives in a way that upholds the ideals for which the men and women gave their lives.
You probably have younger people come. How do you help them understand the importance of the site and the historical significance of it?
I hope to plant a seed, because one day, I say, I won't be here to tell the story. And hopefully one day one of them will be, because it's a story that has to be told.
That was Fox 5's Dana Perino reporting. If you would like to learn more about Dana's experience in Shanksville, you can head to her blog on foxnews.com. And don't miss an encore presentation of Fox News reporting 9/11, Timeline of Terror. It is a moment-by-moment account of the day's tragic events with no interruption by a host, narrator, or commercials. Instead, the story is told using real-time sources, cockpit recordings, phone calls, fire and police dispatches, and news conferences. That is Fox News reporting 9/11, Timeline of Terror. It airs tomorrow night at 9 p.m. Eastern right here on Fox News Channel. We'll be right back. Say at least 11 people are dead following a violent earthquake in Tanzania. The quake rattling the Lake Victoria region of East Africa, where it measured a magnitude of 5.7. The tremors, in fact, felt as far away as western Kenya and parts of Uganda. Meanwhile, another powerful earthquake hitting northern Peru. Officials there saying it measured a magnitude 6.0. No immediate reports of damage or injuries, though. Congressional lawmakers frustrated with so-called sanctuary city policies are now talking in a language that local politicians can understand, finally. Money. The feds are threatening to withhold funding if cities don't change their ways. William LaJeunesse has more from our West Coast newsroom.
I believe that there's a movement inside the administration to continue its current path of allowing people in this country illegally to remain.
Louisiana's top cop is in a high-profile battle with the Justice Department over sanctuary cities. A fight that escalated last week after this bus hit a fire truck, killing a chief. Police charged the driver, Dennis Rodriguez, a Honduran illegal immigrant, with homicide and driving without a license, an offense he'd been cited for multiple times. Jeff Landry claims New Orleans' sanctuary policy protected Rodriguez from being deported.
It basically prohibits our law enforcement agents from taking potentially dangerous criminals off of our streets.
New Orleans' sanctuary policy was mandated by the U.S. Justice Department in a 2011 consent decree. It says, police shall not investigate an individual's immigration status, shall not assist immigration enforcement, and they are not permitted to support any ICE request or operation. Problem is, the department's own Inspector General recently concluded that policy violates federal law, which says no city may prohibit or in any way restrict police from sending, receiving, or exchanging information with ICE. We asked Attorney General Loretta Lynch about the conflict.
That we do not view that consent decree as advising the city in any way to disregard or ignore the immigration laws.
While Lynch didn't directly answer the question, the Inspector General did, concluding New Orleans' sanctuary policy and others like them are illegal, forcing the DOJ to recently warn that sanctuary cities risk losing federal grant money if their cops are not allowed to cooperate with ICE. The top 10 sanctuary jurisdictions received $350 million in federal law enforcement grants in 2014. But despite the IG's legal finding, no one expects this administration to lead a crackdown. That is likely up to the next president. In Los Angeles, William LaJeunesse, Fox News.
A terrifying close call for a driver in Austin, Texas. His car going over the edge of a parking garage. Wow. Look at that, leaving him dangling 9 stories in the air. This after something apparently went wrong with his brakes.
He tried to stop the car as he was pulling in the parking space, and didn't stop.
Well, cables on the outside of the garage, luckily catching the car, perhaps saving his life. I would say most likely saving his life. A bystander helped the driver to safety through an open window. Crews used ropes to lower the car to street level nearly 3 hours later. Wow. Well, it's been 25 years since the first charter school opened here in the United States, and 3 million kids will walk through their doors this year. But unions are still fighting them, like in Washington State, for example, where the education union just won a battle over a measure to create dozens of new charter schools. Dan Springer explains from Seattle.
The Excel Charter School in Kent, Washington is off and running with a keen focus on science, technology, math, and the arts. 2/3 of the students are racial minorities and half are from poor families. But in their first year, they outperform their traditional public school peers.
We have the ability to make decisions that are always best with what students need, and we're always adapting and adjusting.
25 years after the nation's first charter, these public schools of choice, which don't answer to local school districts, have never been more popular. There are now a record 6,800 in the U.S., serving 2.9 million students, 6% of all kids in public schools, a more than doubling over the last decade. And the results are promising. A 2013 Stanford study found on average, charter school kids gained an additional 28 days of learning and reading per year and 40 more days of math than their counterparts in the district-run schools. Despite this, many teachers' unions are still fighting charter schools.
We want to make sure that the paramount duty of the state is taken care of and that our schools are amply funded.
The Washington Education Association successfully challenged a charter school initiative passed by voters, and now it's sued to block the legislature's fix. The state Supreme Court ruled charters were not common schools and ineligible to receive money from the general fund. Critics say the unions are looking out for their interests, not the students who benefit from having a choice.
Charter schooling threatens to disrupt arrangements around teacher benefits, teacher insurance policies, and pensions. Charter schooling creates disruptions that might affect teachers' jobs.
The lawsuit won't threaten this school year for Washington State charters, but definitely puts their future in jeopardy. Meantime, the rapid growth continues in most of the rest of the country, giving parents more educational options than they've ever had before. In Seattle, Dan Springer, Fox News.
Heart-stopping video showing the moment an ominous funnel cloud touches down in a Midwestern community. We'll have the latest on the damage caused by this twister. Plus, are pets okay for national parks? It is the question at the center of a canine controversy that some say is a doggone shame. Caught on camera, a twister ripping through central Illinois. Just one of 4 tornadoes reported in the area. Take a look at this one touching down in Champaign County, where at least 2 homes were destroyed. The storms toppling trees, toppling power lines, sparking outages. The National Weather Service now surveying the damage across all 3 counties today. The good news, no injuries were reported. Well, the fur is flying in San Francisco, where some pet owners say the National Park Service is trying to put them on a leash by restricting their access to certain parts of popular park. But the Park Service says that they are barking up the wrong tree. Claudia Cowan has a story.
Our paws! Keep their laws off our paws!
It's a dogfight over proposed restrictions on where pets are allowed inside the Golden Gate National Recreation Area, over 80,000 acres of protected land spanning the San Francisco coastline. Among other things, owners are challenging rules that would limit where their dogs can roam off-leash, a freedom they've enjoyed for decades.
The Park Service has provided no science behind these really restrictive plans, and the fact is, I mean, this is how we recreate.
But not every dog comes when called. Critics say some have chased wildlife, damaged protected habitat, and intimidated other visitors. Environmental attorney and dog owner Brent Plater says the Park Service is being reasonable.
What they're trying to do is put basic safeguards in place so that everybody can enjoy the national park when they go to visit it and not have an off-leash dog experience imposed upon them just because they decide to visit the National Park Service.
But these owners and their lawyer see a disturbing trend.
This is really emblematic of a larger problem that you're seeing around the country, where folks who historically use and have access to public lands are fed up with the heavy hand of the federal government.
A national park spokesman says the agency is now considering thousands of comments on both sides before submitting the final regulations next year. And supporters say even when they take effect, this will still be the only national park to allow any kind of off-leash dog walking. Not good enough, say those activist dog owners who vow to keep fighting the pending restrictions in court. In San Francisco, Claudia Cowan, Fox News.
And right now, a ceremony in southern Pennsylvania currently underway. Look at that glow. It is remembering a group of American heroes who gave their lives to fight back against the 9/11 hijackers. And as you can see, the candles are burning brightly there as 40 candles were lit, being arranged this hour at the Wall of Names in Shanksville, right below all the names of those heroes and those innocent civilians who died 15 years ago when Flight 93 crashed. Investigators do think the hijackers intended to crash the plane into the U.S. Capitol building, meaning those heroes saved countless lives. And tonight's ceremony is a tribute to the passengers who sprang into action, saving those lives. We'll be right back. Checkbooks, too. The San Francisco home from the hit sitcom is now available for rent. How much, you think, is the big question? $13,950 a month. For that price, you get 3,000 square feet of living space, including 3 bedrooms, 3.5 baths, and a 1-car garage. The Olsen twins not included. NASA's roving probe on Mars sending back spectacular new images. The Mars Curiosity showing a desert-like terrain with rocks and boulders scattered about and soaring mesas. Scientists think groundwater eroded the ancient sandstone and are putting together large mosaics from the many pictures taken from that. And that is how Fox reports this Saturday, September 10th, 2016. I've missed you all. It's been 4 long months, Joel. Can you believe it? 4 long months. You seem so happy to have me back. I'm Julie Badger. Thanks for watching. Hannity starts now.